Most people think they know the moment when a door becomes a barrier between safety and danger. You lock it, maybe check it once before going to bed, and that's it. But a few years ago, a man in Ohio told police something that still unsettles investigators to this day. He said every night, before sleeping, he checked his front door. Every single night. And for 3 weeks straight. Someone had been unlocking it after he fell asleep. The disturbing part wasn't just that someone had access to his house. It was that nothing inside was ever stolen. Instead, things moved. A chair that faced the window would be turned toward the hallway. A kitchen drawer that was closed before bed would be slightly open in the morning. His dog, normally calm, began growling at the hallway every night around 2:30 a.m. At first, he thought he was imagining it. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe the dog was reacting to something outside. But then one morning he woke up and saw something that made his stomach drop. The chain lock on the inside of the door was hanging open, and he was absolutely certain he had locked it. Stories like that might sound like urban legends, but police records across the United States and Canada show something uncomfortable. Many home intrusion cases don't involve theft. Sometimes the person entering a home isn't looking to steal anything at all. Sometimes they're just watching. And tonight's story isn't about ghosts, monsters, or anything supernatural. It's about real situations where people thought their homes were safe until they realized someone had been closer than they ever imagined. So before we continue, take a quick second and think about something. Did you lock your door tonight? If you enjoy real-life horror deep dives like this, make sure you resubscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. Because some of the stories we explore here come directly from real police reports, and the details tend to stay with you longer than you expect. One case that investigators still talk about quietly happened in 2017 in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. The kind of area where people leave their porch lights on but rarely think twice about security. The woman who lived there was named Melissa. Melissa was a 32-year-old nurse who worked overnight shifts at a hospital about 20 minutes away. Her routine was predictable. She left around 6:30 in the evening and came back home close to 7:30 in the morning. For the first year she lived there, nothing unusual ever happened. Then small things started appearing. One morning she came home and noticed the bathroom cabinet was open. She assumed she had left it like that while rushing to work. A few days later, the kitchen light was on when she walked in the front door. Again, she brushed it off. Anyone who's worked night shifts knows how exhausting that schedule can be. Memory gets fuzzy, details slip. But after about 2 weeks, Melissa noticed something she couldn't explain. Her shower curtain was wet, not damp from humidity. Actually wet, as if someone had used the shower within the last hour. The strange part was that Melissa had showered at the hospital gym before leaving work that morning. She hadn't used her bathroom at all. For a while, she convinced herself maybe there was a leak or condensation. She even asked a plumber to check the pipes. Everything looked normal. Then one night while she was at work, her neighbor texted her, "Hey, is someone staying at your house?" Melissa immediately replied, "No." The neighbor said he had seen a man standing near her side window around midnight. The guy had been there for a while, just standing still, looking inside. When the neighbor stepped onto his porch, the man walked away quickly. Melissa called the police, but by the time officers arrived, the street was empty. At that point, she installed 2 cheap security cameras inside the house. Nothing showed up for several nights. Then on the 5th night, around 2:14 a.m., one of the cameras recorded something that made Melissa move out of the house less than a week later. The footage showed her hallway. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly, the bathroom door opened. A man stepped out. He looked calm, almost casual. He walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and drank directly from a carton of milk before putting it back. Then he disappeared into a part of the house that the camera couldn't see. When Melissa showed the footage to police, the first question they asked was simple. "Do you know him?" She didn't. Investigators searched the house and eventually discovered how he had been getting in. Behind the laundry room was a small crawl space leading under the floorboards. It was supposed to be sealed with plywood, but someone had removed it from the inside. That meant the person had been hiding in the crawl space. Inside her home, possibly 4 weeks, the man was never identified. And what bothered Melissa most wasn't just that he had been there. It was that he had never tried to harm her. He had simply waited until she left for work and lived inside her house during the night. Cases like that are more common than people realize. Investigators call them frogging incidents, when someone secretly lives in another person's home without their knowledge. Most victims only realize it after noticing strange details that don't quite make sense. Lights turning on, food disappearing, doors that were locked suddenly unlocked. But sometimes the warning signs are much darker. In 2015, a college student in North Carolina experienced something that started with a single sound. Every night around 3 a.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her bedroom. At first, she thought it was one of her roommates, but when she asked them the next morning, they all insisted they had been asleep. For several nights, the sound continued. Soft footsteps. Slow. Measured. Back and forth across the hallway floor. Eventually, she began locking her bedroom door. One night, the footsteps stopped right outside it. Then came a quiet knock. Just 3 taps. The student froze in bed, staring at the door. Just before this, she was lying in bed, staring at her door, listening to footsteps that weren't supposed to be there. And what happened next is where things stopped feeling like imagination and started becoming something very real. After a moment, she asked who was there. No one answered, but the door handle slowly began to move. Police were called the next morning. What they found shocked everyone in the house. Inside the attic crawl space above the hallway, there were blankets, empty food wrappers, and a flashlight. Someone had been living there, watching the house from above, listening to every conversation, sleeping just a few feet above their heads. The person responsible was later identified as a former maintenance worker who had secretly kept a key to the building. When investigators questioned him, he admitted he sometimes walked through the hallway at night just to see if anyone was awake. What unsettled officers most was how calm he seemed while describing it. He didn't act like he had committed a crime. He talked about it like he had simply been visiting. If you're still listening right now, there's something worth mentioning. Most people who watch horror movies expect fear to come from something obvious. A masked intruder. A loud break-in. A threat that is impossible to ignore. But real cases often look very different. They unfold quietly. Gradually, with tiny details that feel easy to dismiss. A door left slightly open. A light that shouldn't be on. A noise that could be explained away. And by the time the truth becomes clear, the person responsible might have already been there for weeks. There was another case investigators discussed in a documentary about unusual home intrusions. A man in Colorado began noticing something odd every evening after work. His back door would be unlocked. At first, he blamed himself. Maybe he had forgotten. So one night, he double-checked the lock and even placed a chair against the door. When he returned the next day, the chair had been moved. Nothing else in the house was disturbed, but the chair was clearly not where he left it. The next evening, he installed a motion sensor camera. The footage captured someone entering the house just after midnight. The figure moved carefully, almost like they knew the layout of the home. They walked directly to the kitchen, opened a drawer, took out a knife, and then simply stood there for nearly 5 minutes. Doing nothing, just standing in the dark kitchen. Then they placed the knife back in the drawer and left through the back door. Police later discovered the person responsible had been a former tenant who still had a spare key. When officers asked why he entered the house, his answer was disturbing in its simplicity. He said he missed living there, and sometimes he just wanted to walk through it again. At this point in the story, you might be wondering something. How often does this actually happen? The honest answer is, no one really knows. Many cases are never reported. Victims often assume they're imagining things, or they only discover the truth after installing cameras months later. And that leads to a question investigators sometimes ask during interviews with victims. What made you finally check your door? Because almost every person who experiences something like this describes the same turning point. A moment where something feels undeniably wrong. A detail that refuses to be ignored. For Melissa, it was the camera footage. For the college student, it was the moving door handle. For the man in Colorado, it was the chair. And for one family in Illinois, it was something much quieter. Every night, their young son insisted his bedroom door stay closed. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was what he said one morning at breakfast. He casually told his parents, "The man in the hallway opened my door again last night." They assumed he had a nightmare. But when the father checked the door later that day, he noticed scratch marks near the handle, marks that looked like someone had tried to turn it slowly. Police eventually discovered a man hiding in an abandoned shed behind the property. Inside the shed were several items taken from the house, including a spare key. Investigators believe he had been entering the home late at night for nearly a month. The child had seen him several times, but thought he was just someone who lived there. If you think about that for a moment, it raises an uncomfortable possibility. How many strange things happen in homes every night that people never notice? A door opened quietly, a shadow passing through a hallway, a lock turning softly in the dark. This isn't meant to make anyone paranoid, but it does explain why many investigators give the same advice when discussing cases like these. Always check your locks and pay attention to small details, because sometimes the difference between imagination and reality is just one moment of proof. One camera recording, one unexpected sound, or one door that you're absolutely sure you're locked, suddenly being open in the morning. And if there's one thing these stories consistently remind us, it's this. The scariest situations rarely start with something dramatic. They begin with tiny questions. Questions like, why is the light on? Why is the door open? Why is the dog staring at the hallway? So tonight, before you go to bed, you might do something you normally wouldn't. You might walk over to the door one more time, just to make sure. And if you're still watching, I'm curious about something. Have you ever experienced something strange in your home that you couldn't explain? Maybe a noise, a door moving, or an object that wasn't where you left it? Let me know in the comments. And if this story made you think about someone you know who loves real-life horror, send it to them too. Because sometimes the most unsettling stories aren't about what's hiding in the dark. They're about realizing the door you trusted might not have been the barrier you thought it was.